What's the worst thing someone has ever done to you? Please like and subscribe to support us. My parents divorced when I was 7. My father had an affair. My father remarried and got a new family. My mother remained single and bitter. She still loved him. They always used to argue about whose turn it was to have me. They were trying to spite each other. But the only thing that actually happened was that I realized neither of them must have loved me. One Christmas Eve, when I was 14, they were having the same argument. My dad and his new family were staying in a hotel and told my mom they hadn't booked a room for me. I walked to my mom's, and she said it was my dad's turn to have me and locked me out. I slept in a car park fire hose. It didn't actually have a fire hose in it. I was so fucking scared and cold. Skinny kid. I knew I couldn't ask my friends to stay because it was Christmas Eve, already close to midnight by this point. I started to cry when the snow started falling at about 3 a.m. I wish I had known back then that I could have just called the police, but my juvenile brain didn't know that. I went to live in a children's home shortly after that, and honestly, I loved it. I still think of my key worker as my dad. He was great. Was early high school. Joking around with my father, horrid temper, switch flipped with him. He chased me down the hallway, thought we even playing till he pinned me down, hand around my throat strangling me till I passed out. Burst blood vessels in my eyes. Had to wear sunglasses for a good week to hide them while at work or elsewhere. My 60-year-old mother-in-law wanted to sign her house over to us because she has no retirement and no money saved. My wife was pregnant with our second child, and she told us she wanted to be a stay-at-home grandma. I would be coming in and paying for everything. So we sold our house, paid off our debt, and cut a check for $54,000 to her ex-husband, which paid off the house in full. Then I made $10,000 worth of home repairs. All bills were transferred in my name. When it came to sign the deal, suddenly, she didn't want to do it. Told us she wanted things to go back to the way they were. My father-in-law told her, well, then we need to take out a home equity loan to give her their money back. She refused. The next week she served us an eviction notice and moved her boyfriend she claimed was abusive to her back in 2 days later. She threw her own daughter, my 3-year-old, and my 3-month-old baby on the streets. We tried to reason with her, and then she had her lawyer threaten us with a restraining order. So now I'm using her for my money back. Luckily my father-in-law is on our side, and we were able to stay with him for the time being. My ex-wife made me believe I was making up all the proof that she was having an affair. For a couple of years. I went through therapy and anger management, accepted that I was just a fucked up person, and should have never disrespected my loving wife by accusing her of such things. She pushed all the help on me, praised me, etc. 2 weeks after we divorced, she cheated on the guy she was dating, another affair dude, with me, and admitted to everything. I kicked her out of my house immediately. My dad used to beat me and my sister with belts, hangers, brushes, and not just a pop on the butt. He'd hit us as hard as he could repeatedly until our legs and butt were black and blue, and I remember hearing my sister's screams and cries for him to stop in the next room. My sister used to take off running to her bedroom whenever my dad would come home. My dad beat her for running to her room whenever he noticed the empty recliner in the living room rocking back and forth, meaning she leapt out of it fast to avoid him. Now whenever someone pulls off their belt, I immediately back away. My ex one time was just packing his bag for a trip and had a belt in his hand, and I responded in that way. My stepdad stole 2 houses, 2 cars, a scooter, and a boat from us when my mother died. He then proceeded to commit perjury and tell the judge that he was broke because he paid me and my sister $60,000 each. This got him out of a loan that he had from my aunt, who loaned my mother hundreds of thousands of euros so she could buy a house. Basically, he did so much acrobatics that I didn't even get my own bed or clothes back, and he ended up with everything that could remotely be stamped as my mother's property. Overall, the worth of everything he stole, not just from my side of the family, but his ex-wife that he got back to later, is upwards of $500,000. His wife then also dies, and he takes whatever's left. My lawyer told me I couldn't do anything since now 2 wives of his died in a 3-year span, and there was no way a judge would look at him and say he owes anyone anything. Honestly, I think he married my mom and then killed her. The same with his then ex but current after-wife, who also died rather quickly. When I was a kid, my mom and dad weren't very well off, and one day my great-grandfather got terminally ill. My aunt, who was taking care of him at the time, couldn't afford to put him in a nursing home. My mom, being a licensed nurse, agreed to take care of him if they could get some of the money from his life insurance to pay a 1-year lease for the house they took care of him in. My mom and dad took amazing care of him all the way up until around 2 months in when my great-grandfather passed away. When he died, my great-aunt decided to go back on the deal so she and her husband could move to Florida with their son. My parents already signed the lease, and so when this happened, we went homeless. We lived in hotels until eventually, my parents lost custody of me and my sisters, and we've been living with our grandparents ever since. This wasn't told to me until I was 15. I'm 16 now, and I still live with my grandparents. Freshman year of college, I met a girl, and we became best friends. We did everything together. Then one day in class, she told me she didn't want to talk, she wanted to read. That was fine, of course. She did that 2 more days. On the 4th day, she moved her seat from next to me to across the room. I tried to get her attention to talk, but she avoided me. Next week we both happened to be washing our hands in the bathroom together. I said hi. She acted like I never existed. Soon she left the college. I went to grad school 3 years later, somewhere 2 hours away, and lo and behold, she was in my class. We were assigned the same group for a project. She looked uncomfortable, and the next time class met, I found that she had dropped it. I never saw her again. It hurt me deeply because I had no clue why she did this. We didn't fight. I'm not manipulative or catty or anything. This wasn't the worst thing to happen, but it definitely ranked up there. Not exactly the worst, but I had a close friend that, in the space of a week, decided I was the Antichrist. Told our neighbors I had been stalking her, contacted my employer to say the same thing. I had a job as assistant superintendent, spread a lot of gossip and slander. Mind you, none of that stuck to me, because people knew it was BS. A few months later, I found a bin of stuff she had been storing in my condo. Decorating supplies, etc. So, I dropped it at her door, while she was out, with a note saying what it was and that there wouldn't be any other contact. A few days later, I had the police at my door, because dropping off her stuff was harassing and stalking her. Explained my side, showed the nice policewoman all the emails I had saved showing that, yes, we had been friends, no, it wasn't stalking. Ended up with her getting a warning for misuse of 911. My mother was a malignant narcissist. She psychologically abused me and beat me down so low that I never lived up to my full potential. I know it's cliché, supposed to be wrong to blame your parents after you're grown. And I've worked hard to get farther along in life than most people do. But I know I could have been so much more if she hadn't been the sick person that she was. Today, I'm 72 and still moving forward and upward. I have 2 nice homes, my own business and friends. But in the years it took to heal myself, time was not on my side. I could have had the career I wanted if I had not listened to her when I was young. I could have had a home and family had I not been warped. These are things you have to start young at. And I can't grin back time. I blame myself enough. But I still congratulate myself too. I've managed to bring myself to a place where I'm happy and secure. I have a good life now. Where to start? My mother died within 4 hours of going into hospice around 7 p.m. I was notified the next morning she had passed by my brother, who I was not talking to previously. He let me know she went into a coma within a few minutes of arriving in her room. And is notified the night before, though. She arrived about 6 hours later on a red-eye, and my mother had passed already. And calls me about 3 months later and asks me, "Your mother was calling for you when she was dying. She kept asking why you weren't there. Why you weren't there for her. How do you feel about that?" My aunt kept pressing me as I sat there in silence, wondering WTF kind of conversation am I having and what is the truth. I hung up and called my brother, asking him the truth, and flipped out when I told him what my aunt had said. Seriously. Who does this? Burn in hell, bitch. People's stories are far worse than mine, but I suppose everyone's are terrible to the person dealing with it. My dad left when I was 15 months old. I'm 30 years old tomorrow, and there has not been a day I don't think of him and wonder why I wasn't good enough. Every big birthday I had, I thought this may be the year he makes contact. Always feel stupid. I told myself on my 21st birthday I wouldn't do it anymore, wouldn't think about it, but here I am, 30 tomorrow, still hoping I get that card in the post or he turns up at my door. Tried every avenue to find him over the last few years, but he did a good job of making it impossible. It's affected all aspects of my life in ways I never realized until recently. If I make it to a day and I have my own child, I hope I will be good enough to become a father, as I honestly have no idea what it means or how to be one. Spend most of my days thinking of ending this shit. Dated a woman for a time and eventually got involved with her teen kids and acted in a step-parent role for years. Invested tons of my time, energy, and resources into them as a family. Then my GF went into a spell of depression and didn't want to do anything or talk about anything. Life went on around her. Then when she saw me spending time with the kids instead of sitting on the couch doing and saying nothing like her, she became pathologically jealous and started accusing me of having too much interest in young girls. I spent a long time trying to fix and salvage this situation as I felt we were all bonded together as a family. paid out of pocket for counseling for us, and for her exclusively for a long time after the therapist determined the locus of the problem was not me. She never accepted responsibility for her claim and the effects it had. Thought she could just casually dismiss it at will, like she'd claimed I left the toilet seat up one time. Thought I was making a big deal out of everything. She never spent a second addressing the childhood traumas that openly affected her whenever there was a pinch, even invoking them as an excuse for acting how she did, then pretending they were fixed or non-existent the 99% of the time she did not need to use them to manipulate the situation at hand. Finally had to walk away from the situation. Started dating someone else, who was a college debate coach with a PhD in English, night and day communication and interaction styles, and she acted like I abandoned her, even cheated when I made good on my promise to leave without effort on her part. Now a long time later, I still hear from one of the boys who is now in his 30s and just had a baby. At least 2 of my ex's grown children don't even talk to her at this point. I never tried to assemble a family again, but I had a very fulfilling love life since. Had a real piece of shit stepmom when I was 12. My dad married her because he was busy and needed someone to care for my younger brother and I. She loved him but abused the shit out of me. She would push me down the stairs and call me fat. That started the long road of developing a terrible eating disorder that consumed my life until the last couple of years. I'm in recovery and doing well. But as a little kid, without ever having my birth mother around, I still loved her endlessly. My only escape really was video games. I would often spend hours at the computer playing random little games I found online. I remember this so clearly, and it hurt for a long time to think about it. One day she decided she didn't want to live with us and just straight up abandoned us. After she left, I went to go play some games at the computer and found a little nearly folded up note. It was a note she left about how much she hated me. Specifically, she was leaving because she didn't like me or want to be around me. Anyway, yeah, I had a very traumatic childhood. Fuck you, Missy, I hope you're doing terrible in life.